Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, if you do enjoy the video that you came here to watch, do me a favor, go ahead and hit that little red subscribe button at the bottom of the screen. It really does help my audience grow. It really does help this channel grow. It means more than you realize. So go ahead, hit that little red button. Also, remember, full episodes of the Aaron Torres Podcast, wherever you download your podcast, Apple, Spotify, etc. Now, here is the video that you came here for.
With that said, though, like I said, a quick, fast episode of the Aaron Torres Sports Podcast, but boy, oh boy, do we have to get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, I have no doubt what the topic of the day will be on Tuesday in the world of college sports, as we have some new information on the Lane Kiffin to Auburn rumors. Now, this is something I think we were actually pretty far ahead on this show. We were really talking about the Auburn opening weeks before Brian Harsin was fired, because if you remember, what we talked about at the time was that if you were watching Auburn, it was clear that he just wasn't the guy. You get smoked by Penn State. Penn State is good, but they're not elite. You barely survive against Missouri. And so even back then, we started talking about all the different possible candidates at Auburn, and one that came up was Lane Kiffin. And we got into all the reasons why, and we'll get into them again. But really, it was about a week ago where it feels like the Lane Kiffin smoke, if you will, the Lane train started to pick up steam on the tracks. Why is that? Well, it was because multiple Auburn reporters were reporting that Lane Kiffin was, in fact, the favorite of the new AD, John Cohen, and that John Cohen was vigorously pursuing Lane Kiffin as the school's next head coach. So what has happened since then? Well, really, even outside of what happened on Monday, I do think there were two important developments in the last week that led us to where we got Monday. The first, if you remember, one of the reasons, and we've talked about this quite a bit on this show, one of the reasons that we believe that Lane Kiffin could consider leaving Ole Miss has something to do with something that Ole Miss can't control, okay? We've talked about it before. But Mississippi state law says that state employees cannot sign more than 4-year contracts if you're a state employee in the state of Mississippi. And so it doesn't matter how good of a coach you are. It doesn't matter if it's football or basketball or baseball or golf or soccer or whatever else you're coaching. Doesn't matter, whatever. The bottom line is Lane Kiffin can sign for no more than 4 years. Unlike at a place like Auburn, at a place like LSU, remember, LSU, Miami, you go on and on down the list. A lot of these schools have signed their coaches to 10-year contracts. Mel Tucker got a 10-year contract last year at Michigan State. And so I bring it up because Ole Miss cannot do that. And if Auburn comes over the top with a crazy 10-year fully guaranteed contract, it's just something that Ole Miss literally can't match. And so what has happened since then? Well, according to Richard Cross, who covers this team, he said that in the middle of last week, he tweeted this out on November 17th. So at the end of last week, last Thursday, he said that Lane Kiffin had officially been offered a new contract by Ole Miss that would make him one of the 10 highest paid head coaches in college football. Okay. Not great at math. I always say it, but if you just do a quick Google search, he was making about 7.5. Most of the top 10 head coaches in college football make over 8. Mark Stoops just signed a contract that's going to pay him 8.6. And so I would assume if Ole Miss, knowing they can only offer a 4-year contract, really wants to keep Lane Kiffin, I would imagine it's in the 8.5 plus range. But according to a reporter who covers Ole Miss, that contract has been on Lane Kiffin's desk for a week now, or at least 6-7 days. The fact that he has not signed it has been very curious to Ole Miss fans, very curious to Auburn fans, very curious to anybody who has followed it. The second big piece of news that has happened since the last time that we talked Lane Kiffin to Auburn is, Ole Miss got smacked on Saturday night against Arkansas. Now, credit to Arkansas. I don't think it was a distraction thing. I think it was Ole Miss was out of the SEC title race. It was cold. Arkansas was fighting to get bowl eligible. Credit to Sam Pittman for having his guys ready. But there were a lot of people that kind of speculated those guys weren't ready because they were reading the newspapers and the Twitter and message boards that their head coach was leaving. So that brings us to Monday, where two very interesting things happen. One, Lane Kiffin was just kind of sort of asked about it, and you could tell he is not happy to still be answering questions about this. Now, he wasn't asked directly about the Auburn job, but he was essentially asked about the idea that his players were potentially distracted on Saturday night against Arkansas. Here is what Lane Kiffin said about the situation. He was asked if there was any distractions. He said they don't. I think they know how we operate, and they've been in this before. They don't even ask. I don't know what else to say. I'm extremely happy here. The difference in where this program is compared to 3 years ago, and we feel like we have really good support. Then he continued, I can get up here and give the Pine Box speech, and I'm not going to be the Alabama speech. I can give you those things. I don't know what those mean. Been here 3 years and have been fortunate enough to have 3 different contracts. I don't know why a 4th contract makes people feel better. Like I said, we're very appreciative of everything here. Now, some quick context when he says the Pine Box speech. So the Pine Box speech was a very famous speech that ironically, Tommy Tuberville, as the Ole Miss coach, gave on a TV show prior to accepting the Auburn job. He was the Ole Miss head coach a million years ago. He was asked about the Auburn job. He said, they're going to have to take me out of here in a pine box. And of course, a few weeks later, he leaves for Auburn. Now, he claims in hindsight, he had issues with the administration and the administration didn't want to give him a raise, blah, 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 blah. But that was what Lane Kiffin was talking about. And then when he said the I'm not going to Alabama thing, that was obviously in reference to Nick Saban, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. So what Lane Kiffin basically said was like, look, if you want me to give the declarative statement, I'm not doing it because you guys throw it in my face. And the bottom line is I'm happy here. I've been happy here, all that good stuff. Just one problem. We got a second report from another guy who covers Ole Miss in the state of Mississippi on late Tuesday night. And here is what he said. This is from John Sokolov. John Sokolov, who covers Ole Miss and Mississippi State. He is a sports director in the state of Mississippi. Here is what he wrote. And again, remember, Ole Miss's regular season ends on Thursday night when they play in the Egg Bowl, meaning that by Friday, Ole Miss's season will be over. Regular season will be over. Here's what John Sokolov said. He said, Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin plans to step down as Rebels coach Friday and head to Auburn to become the Tigers' next head coach, according to sources. Sources say the Tigers haven't officially offered the job yet to anyone, so Lane to Auburn is happening. Story soon. Ooh, buddy, there is a lot to peel back in this story as a reporter in the state of Mississippi says that he is going to resign as the head coach of Ole Miss on Friday and take the Auburn job. So a couple things stand out to me about this. One, it's very interesting that Lane, that he also says that no offer has been made to anyone from Auburn. That just feels weird. Why is Lane Kiffin going to step down without a formal offer on his desk, on his table? That's something to monitor over the next few hours. I also thought I saw some interesting commentary about this as well. I saw Barrett Salih from CBS Sports brought up a great point. He said, look, I don't think Auburn wants anybody accepting their job before the Iron Bowl because remember, not only is it a big rivalry, but on top of that, not only is it a big rivalry, a prominent alum, Cadillac Williams, who you're probably going to want to keep on the staff if whoever the next head coach is, you don't want to upstage him. You don't want to embarrass him and have somebody publicly accepting or publicly making it clear that they're going to take the job before the Iron Bowl. So the point I'm trying to make, there's a lot of rumor, there's a lot of speculation, and what I think this ultimately comes down to, the good news is pretty straightforward. One, we're going to get an answer here very soon. Whether Lane Kiffin technically resigns on Friday, whether Lane Kiffin technically accepts on Friday, whether Lane Kiffin technically announces that he's coming back on Friday, we will finally get some closure. So will Auburn fans, and they'll either have their next head coach or they are going to have to look somewhere else, whether that is Deion Sanders, Hugh Freeze. I mean, I guess in theory, if they beat Alabama, maybe Cadillac Williams is their head coaching candidate. Now, in terms of what I think is going to happen, I'll just say this. Listen, we call this the silly season for a reason. And I do think, I do still weirdly think this is some kind of weird leverage from Lane Kiffin and his camp to Ole Miss to get whatever they want out of Ole Miss done. It feels weird that really, frankly, listen, no disrespect to the guy that put it out there. That setup feels weird. Why would he resign the day after? Why? Like there's just a lot that doesn't make sense there. But there is a lot that does make sense. Now, in terms of why Lane Kiffin would take the job, we have already talked about it, and we have talked about it at length. One, you can say what you want about Auburn, but it is still, in fact, a better job than Ole Miss. I know there's been problems. I know there's been strife, but we have talked about it. Take out Brian Harsin. He was a disaster. The coach before Brian Harsin, Gus Malzahn, won the SEC a few times, won the SEC once, played for a national title, played for multiple SEC titles. The coach before him, Gene Chizik, won a national championship. The coach before him, Tommy Tuberville, easily could have won a national championship if there was a 4-team playoff. The coach before him, Terry Bowden, of course, had an undefeated regular season when Auburn wasn't bowl eligible. So don't tell me that Auburn isn't a great job, because it is. And with Lane Kiffin, obviously it is a step up. Keep in mind a few other things as well. One, and this is important, there is that whole 4-year contract in the state of Mississippi thing. Again, I hate to keep beating the same dead horse, but it is important, right? If somebody's going to offer you a 10-year fully guaranteed contract or an 8-year fully guaranteed contract, and the last place can only offer you 4 years, you're going to have to consider it. Whether you're a millionaire football coach, whether you're making $50K a year, whatever it is, you have to consider it for yourself, for your future, for your family, especially when, as I just said, it is in fact a better job. On top of that, the NIL thing is real. Remember, we've talked about Ole Miss. I love Ole Miss. I've been to games there. I had a blast every time I've gone. But at the same time, Lane Kiffin has complained about the passion. Lane Kiffin has complained about the interest from fans. Lane Kiffin has basically said, this is like high school. Why are you guys showing up after kickoff? That isn't an issue at Auburn. And what especially isn't an issue is the NIL stuff. Remember, NIL, part of the reason that the new AD, John Cohen, went to Auburn was because their NIL setup is way ahead of where he was at Mississippi State, and it's reportedly way ahead of where Ole Miss is as well. Listen, we can fight it, we can argue it, we can hate it, but the truth is that NIL is going to play a big role in where recruits go going forward, and every coach wants access to the best recruits, and NIL is going to be the way to do it in the future. Now, in terms of why he might stay, he kind of said it in his press conference. He's happy at Ole Miss. His daughter lives with him. He's having a good time. They let him be him. And I do go back to something else that he said, which I think is very important as well. What did he say? He said, we've done 3 different new contracts in 3 years since I've been here. I don't know why the 4th one is going to make you guys and girls feel so much more comfortable, for lack of a better term. And it is interesting. I always go back to, what about last year? Remember when LSU opened? Remember when Miami opened? Remember when Florida opened? And everybody said that Lane Kiffin was the favorite there. He didn't go anywhere. I don't even know if he got any interviews, but he did get a big raise at Ole Miss. And I do wonder what's going on going forward. Again, I don't discredit any of the reporters down there. There's just something that feels awfully weird about this. Listen, at this point, there's so much smoke. If you ask me what I think is actually going to happen, my guess would be that probably feels a little bit more likely that he leaves than he stays. I mean, it's pretty hard at this point when you have multiple reports, the weird commentary of everything that he has said over the last couple days. It does feel a little weird, but I'm telling you, this also sort of feels like a weird leverage play, and it wouldn't shock me at all if he signs a new contract at some point in the future. Here's the good news. Like I said, we are going to get answers here in probably the next 72 hours as Ole Miss gets set to wrap its season on Thursday.